Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to welcome all of you to yet another edition of our Sunday webinar. The topic for this week is living life as a mystery. I want to begin by thanking all of you who have spared very precious time today, despite the fact that the weather outside is very inviting and warm and sunny. Those of you who have chosen to stay indoors and be present at this webinar, my gratitude and thanks go out to you. So thank you so much for joining us today. The topic for today is living life as a mystery. And I want to just begin with a very small story that just happened to me a few minutes ago that miraculously, I couldn't think of a better way to begin with this seminar than with this story. So it so happened that I tried to drop a whole bunch of laundry down the laundry chute from the second floor, and it got wedged and stuck right in the middle between the second floor and the basement. So it's about, let's say, 15 feet where the laundry is stuck. What do? Immediately, I think maybe if I drop a heavy weight down the chute, it'll push the bed sheets and other things that are stuck in the chute and force it to go down. So I find the biggest book that I possess, which is Osho's Book of Secrets, 112 meditations to discover the mystery within. I go up and drop it, but the book is so big that it too gets lodged in the small shaft of the laundry chute. So now I have compounded the problem. I have a whole bunch of laundry and Osho's Book of Secrets sitting in it. So I'm beginning to think, what am I going to do? So I use every long device within my house, a broom and other attachments that I have to try to reach it. And all of these devices are falling woefully short of the length that I need. So, maybe I have things that are about 5 feet and I need something between 12 to 15 feet long. So this is the problem. And eventually I give up. I have to prepare for my Sunday webinar. And I start looking on Amazon for what I would be able to find. And I find extension poles that can be extended, for this purpose, costing anywhere from $39 to $79. But I say, okay, let me take care of it after the Sunday webinar. I sit down. Now I want to tell you this. There's a tree outside in my front yard that I often spend a lot of meditative time with and connect with very deeply. And suddenly there's a thud and my neighbors come running out. And that very tree has shed a branch, a perfectly healthy branch with leaves and everything on it. So it's not a dead branch falling to the ground, of exactly the dimensions that I need, 12 to 15 feet long. A branch has fallen to the ground. We take off the leaves, I take it to the basement, and the rest is history. Now, I can't think of a better way to begin this webinar on living life as a mystery than to share with you an incident like this, which leaves you just in a sense of spectacular awe at the mystery of the universe. It's almost like this giving tree that I speak to every day, has spoken, in its own inimitable way. I have never had a branch fall from any of the trees here. It is not a particularly windy day in Cleveland, as you would know, and miraculously the branch falls and I'm able to use it, to unclog the chute. So I just wanted to share that. And of course, the word tree is hidden in the word mystery, so I can't help but point that out. I thought that's a great way to be able to presence this experience of living life as a mystery. Now, I want to also begin by referring to reminding you of Osho's 4 ways to approach life by invoking the metaphor of the rose. One way is you look at a rose, and if you're approaching life as a business person, your question is, how much can I sell this rose for? If you're approaching life as a scientist, your question is, how can I understand the rose by cutting it, possibly placing it under a microscope and analyzing it deeply? If you're approaching the rose as an artist, probably your orientation tells you to not cut the rose, but in fact to accentuate its beauty, perhaps by painting it, perhaps by taking a photo of it, perhaps by writing a poem of it. And the 4th orientation that Osho talks about is the orientation of the mystic, where the mystic is just enchanted by the mystery of the universe, the beauty of the rose. He or she dances, embracing the beauty of the rose, celebrating the beauty of the rose. They don't have a need to sell the rose or analyze it or even to appreciate it as art, but just to be in sync with the mystery. Where was the rose yesterday? And where will the rose be? Where will its beauty disappear once it dries up and withers to the ground? So the mystical orientation is, in a way, very different from the scientist. Of course, many scientists eventually become mystics, but at a more mundane level, science is about finding logical explanations and empirical evidence to reduce the mystery of the universe, whereas the mystic revels in the mystery of the universe, celebrates the mystery of the universe, and dances with the mystery of the universe. Now, of course, if we have to celebrate life as a mystery, there is something that we have to be ready to renounce, something that we have to be ready to give up, which is very hard to give up. And Osho would often remind us that the hardest thing to give up is knowledge. Knowledge is very hard to renounce. He said you can renounce food and physical comforts, and sex and all of that are much easier to renounce. But knowledge is very hard to renounce, because what we have to do in order to renounce knowledge is acquire a deep capacity, perhaps subliminally, to be able to die every moment. Because what is it that we are carrying with us? It's the weight of the dead past. And it's the weight of the dead past that we glorify and call knowledge. So we require the ability to die to the past almost every moment, to be able to see the eyes, to be able to see the world through the fresh eyes of mystery. And Osho, of course, humorously talks about, how hard it is to renounce knowledge, and how knowledge often creates so much tension and conflict. And he jokingly says, you meet a person, who you start dating, a significant other. You go out on dates, you get to know them. Everything seems so beautiful. Live 3 days with that person, and all of a sudden, you have knowledge about the person. And that knowledge can, in fact, completely transform your experience of enchantment and, the romantic fragrance of the relationship and everything. One of the challenges is that when knowledge comes in, there are two layers of consciousness that immediately get drawn into it. One of it is our own ego, because with knowledge comes the egoistic recognition or realization that I know. And the second thing that comes in along with the ego is the mind, what we often refer to as the chattering monkey, the voice inside our head that's constantly making up theories and interpretations of our experiences. In fact, the mind is incapable of just being with the experience. The moment you have an experience, the mind is automatically transforming it into a concept. Hence, the Eastern wisdom traditions emphasize the necessity of transcending the mind, of going beyond the mind. But the paradox there is that you have to use the mind to go beyond the mind. And that, of course, is a deeply, deeply mystical act. For the mind, as many mystics say, is like a train running on a track. It always does the same set of operations, right? And even though life is constantly changing, just as Heraclitus said, you cannot step into the same river twice. Life is constantly changing from moment to moment. Everything is new. Every moment is brand new. But the mind, unfortunately, has the capacity for memory. It records everything. So to the mind, everything is old because it compares anything that's new with what is already there. And in trying to interpret what is new in terms of what's already known, it has taken away the freshness and the fragrance of whatever is new. Now, the mind looks for certainty, and perhaps in an evolutionary way, the mind is a very necessary part of our survival, of our self-preservation. Carl White, the University of Michigan professor, talks about an example where there was a group of mountaineers who were lost on an expedition that had, strayed away from the trail. And I know Terry Martin's ears picked up when I said lost on an expedition, because he's a man who frequently embarks upon expeditions in very complex mountainous terrain. So somebody lost on an expedition, a group of people. Now, they don't have a map, they don't have any way to navigate themselves. And I guess this happened before the days of the GPS and all the advancements in technology. So they're completely flummoxed and they don't know what to do. Just then one of them dips into the pocket and finds the map. And using the map, they're able to come back to a safe place and find their way back to civilization. It's only upon coming back to a town or city and no longer feeling lost that they discover, much to their surprise, that the map was never a map of this mountain range. It was a map of a completely different mountain range. And that's what knowledge does. They're lost in the Alps, but they're carrying a map of the Himalayas. But just the fact or the idea or the sense of optimism that comes from having a map with them energizes them and helps them to find their way. It kind of is an interesting story that tells us the enormous dependence on the mind, and the ways in which it helps us navigate some of the uncertainties of life. There's an expression that comes from the Landmark Forum. They talk about already always listening. And you will notice that many of us have a tendency to be listening for something that we expect. And that's why we say already always listening. You would expect from Param that if you get together with him for a cup of coffee, he'll start pontificating about love and compassion and the mysteries of the universe. He may know nothing about these topics, but he will certainly not be restrained in his eloquence or his ability to speak endlessly about these topics. You have an already always listening for Param. I'm sure all of you have that individual in your life who you know is bound to start an argument if you spend 4 or 5 hours with them. And you're almost like waiting for them to start their argument. So this tendency called the already always listening means that we are primed to expect people to be a certain way. And the sense of anticipatory reality that we create in expecting people to show up in a certain way almost robs people of their freedom to be themselves. Because if Terry Martin expects me to be in a certain way and I show up in his world, I'm likely to unconsciously orient myself to fulfill the expectations, implicit expectations that he might carry with them. So one of the ways in which mysticism becomes a harder state to reach is because all of us carry already always listenings. I carry an already always listening for Terry, and Terry carries an already always listening for me. And in recycling and regurgitating this mutual expectations we have of each other, we lose our ability to encounter each other in the freshness of the here now. And that's something to be conscious of. It's not something that can be managed consciously, but just the awareness of it sometimes allows for a newer possibility outside the Procrustean bed of anticipated options to show up and to surprise us. I also want to pay homage to a German philosopher called Hans Wahinger, who was I believe, a follower of Kant, Immanuel Kant. Now, Hans Wahinger wrote a book called The Philosophy of As If, where he lays down a simple idea. The idea is that the universe, as William James would have us believe, is a blooming, buzzing world of confusion and chaos. The mind feels simply overwhelmed by the chaos. In order to manage the chaos of the universe, the mind starts creating ways of organizing the chaos of the universe, what he calls useful fictions. Useful fictions are like conceptual representations of the universe, mini mental models that are enabling us to get by and live our lives. And often we spend our life lost in useful fictions. What the call of the mystic is to wake us up to the fact that we are wandering in a desert of useful fictions. And while that might be justifiable from a pragmatic and utilitarian point of view, do we really want to give up the universe's mystery in order for security, for a sense of predictability, order, and stability? How do we maintain a sense of stability, but use that as a basis for accessing deeper state of safety from where we can then feel open to exploring the mystery of the world? Now, I want to draw upon a very beautiful chapter that I read this morning called What is Mysticism, from a book by Osho called The Secret. So this book by Osho called The Secret has a chapter called What is Mysticism? And I read it, I found it beautiful. And I said, what is it more meaningful I can do today than to try to bring in my own way the beauty and the intricacies of what Osho brings to us about mysticism through this chapter. So I want to begin with a definition of mysticism from the book, from the chapter, What is Mysticism, in the book, The Secret by Osho. Mysticism, he says, is the experience that life is not logic, that life is poetry, that life is not a syllogism, that life is a song. Mysticism is the declaration that life can never really be known. It is essentially unknowable. And then he goes on to clarify that science divides the universe into two domains, the domain of the known and the domain of the unknown. What mysticism does is that it adds a third domain beyond that of the known and the unknown, and that is the domain of the unknowable, to grant it that there will be a dimension of the universe that is not just known, that is not just unknown, that is essentially unknowable. And that dimension actually makes our life richer, makes our life more exciting, and holds tremendous possibilities in terms of potential, in terms of surprise, in terms of magic and mystery. So that unknowable can never be known, but can be experienced. What do we mean by that? And Osho talks about the beautiful example of a river. You know, a river is flowing into the ocean and becomes one with the ocean. Now, can the river come to know the ocean? No. At the point at which the river merges and flows into the ocean, the river has become part of the ocean. Now, when it has become part of the ocean, there is no two. You need a dichotomy of an observer and a subject in order to know something. The know and the knower and the known have to exist as two separate entities. But when the river merges into the ocean, there is unity. There is only one. There is no relationship between two elements, and there is nothing that can be known. It has to be experienced. And of course, the same thing happens when you sing. You become one with the music. You don't know the music. You have become the music. Same also it is with lovers. The lover dissolves into the beloved, says Osho. The seeker becomes one with the sought. The dewdrop melts and falls into the ocean. And in such unity, no knowledge is possible. And it's a very interesting reminder that science depends upon the development of fine distinctions, which means that science depends upon the development of separateness. Objects and subjects are separate. And that is how it flourishes. And where unity exists, you can experience the unknown, but you cannot necessarily know the unknown. He also etymologically traces the word mysticism from a Greek word mysterion, which means secret ceremony. And what does he mean by that? He talks about how from ancient times, people who have touched the unknowable, they will sometimes gather to share with each other. And the sharing is not verbal. It is not something that can be codified in the form of concepts and knowledge. It is people pouring their being into each other. If you look from the outside, you cannot know. Just as in a very intimate relationship, it is only the participants in the relationship who are sharing something that is completely invisible to everybody else. It is not a commodity like I give you a piece of chocolate. It is two beings beautifully flowing into one another and creating a music, a oneness. In the East, Osho talks about the word ras, which means dancing with the master. And in the East, where it is common for people to have masters, like in the Sufi tradition, in the Zen tradition, you know, and in the Taoist tradition and traditions like that, energies are flowing. And in these meetings, there will be a person like a master who is enlightened, who is a light into himself or herself, who's sitting with a group of disciples who represent the unlit candles in the congregation. And the light jumps as if from the lit candle to the unlit candle. People sat around Buddha. They called it satsang, meaning being with the truth. And Buddha is the lit candle, and the people who sit next to him in deep love and gratitude, the flame will jump from the master to the disciple. But there are some preconditions that have to be there. You have to be sitting in a space of love and gratitude. And this is something that our modernity has robbed from us. By telling us the virtues of the scientific method and dispassionate analysis, it has extinguished some of the beautiful emotions like love and gratitude. Even when we sit with our beloved, how often do we sit in love and gratitude? Because it is only, says Osho, in love and gratitude that human beings, the universe, will reveal their beauty to you. It's only when you love nature that nature reveals its beauty to you. It's only when you truly and unconditionally love another human being that they will reveal their beauty to you. So it is often there's a lack of trust in our relationships. So I want to use this as a segue for us to invite you to look at where in our relationships are we lacking in trust that makes it hard for us. We don't trust the other person. We grudgingly sometimes trust the other person, but we are waiting for the other shoe to drop. We are waiting for them to make a faux pas where we can go back to a posture of distrust and say, this person cannot be trusted. And we sit in distrust, and it becomes hard for us to be able to access that level of relatedness from where in deep communion, people reveal their deepest mystery to us. Which brings us to another thing. When we become mystics, we are not listening to the words, says Osho. We are listening to consciousness. We are listening to energies flowing between people, dancing with each other. We are listening to a being-to-being communication. In intimate communication, says Osho, in communion, the words are heard as one hears music, as wind blowing through the pine trees, as raindrops falling on the roof, roar of the waves in the ocean. So the mind is deeply engaged with the music, but the heart starts absorbing the being. And that's what happens even in our most intimate relationships. Think of your most intimate relationships, especially if you're a heart-oriented person. You will notice that the other person may be talking and you're listening to their words, but what you're really absorbing, your mind is listening to their words, but your heart is actually become attuned to their heart. So the two hearts are joined as one. The heart starts absorbing the being. You experience the other person as a presence, not as a collection of thoughts. And in ancient, in the old traditions of Zen and Sufism and stuff, it's referred to as transmission, where the light is transferred from one person to another. Compassion, love, caring, courage. These are things that one can lecture about endlessly, and they cannot be conceptually captured. But when you're in the presence of somebody who embodies these emotions in a powerful way, it's almost like they're contagious. And some of these metaphysical states of consciousness, states of being, are transmitted invisibly, not like a commodity, not like a piece of candy, but like an energy flow. Now, interestingly, Mysterian, says Osho, also comes from another root called myein, M-Y-E-I-N, which means to keep one's mouth shut, something that I'm absolutely not doing this moment, and something that my close friends will tell you I have a very hard time doing. But it is the gateway to mysticism. And ironically, I'm lecturing about the mystical worldview and living life as a mystery, but using such a conceptual way of doing it. Now, why do we say that it comes from the word myein, which means to keep one's mouth shut? Because there are experiences that we have all had where you've seen and experienced something so vast, so immense, perhaps a truth so magnificent, so big that you cannot express it, so big that it cannot be contained in words. And that is when you become speechless, you become silent. And many great masters, including Osho, went through a phase in their life. Meher Baba, for example, in Pune, who was a master that Peter Townsend of The Who was a disciple of. Meher Baba and all of these people, they become completely silent because they have seen a level of reality, a level of mystery, a level of existence, an awe that is so profound that no words can do justice to it. There's a very beautiful paragraph by Osho in this book where he uses a bunch of words to bring to us the limitations of the words. And I cannot help but share this with you. He says, suppose I say, I have seen a beautiful tree. And, I started this webinar with the anecdote of the tree shedding one of its branches very generously, very lovingly, because I needed it, to unclog the laundry chute. If I say I've seen a beautiful tree, he says, notice the word beautiful doesn't capture any of the beauty. It does not contain the greenery of the tree. It does not embody the shape of the tree. It tells you nothing about the roots of the tree that go deep. It tells you nothing about the sun rays that are falling on the tree's leaves. It's telling nothing to you about the beautiful flowers. You cannot, in that sentence, feel the fragrance of the wet earth of the beautiful birds that have built nests on the trees, of the songs of these birds. The word beautiful, he says, contains no roots, no wings, no gold, no green, no red. Can you see how poor language is? I think I've said a lot when I say I've seen a beautiful tree, but just as I shared this with you, the word beautiful is very poor relative to the immenseness of what the universe is giving us. And then he says, however, if I say I've seen a beautiful tree or I've seen a beautiful rose, you might conjure up in your own mind a rose or a tree because you've had experiences that tell you what a rose or a tree is. So immediately you will dig out experiences and folders and files and photos and images from your life of beautiful trees and flowers, like a rose or a tree. But he says, what if I speak to you of things that you've never known deeply? For example, very few people in the world really know what love is, what pure love is. Most people who say, I love you, are mistaking whatever they're saying is love for domination, for politics, for control. You know, how many people do we know whose love is so flimsy that it depends upon a set of preconditions? And if those preconditions disappear, the love has also evaporated immediately. So most of us don't know the meaning of the word love, and we confuse our sense of desire to dominate the person, politics, all of control the person, and we think that is love. So if somebody who has known love speaks to you of love, what can you understand of that love if you have never experienced that kind of love? For example, if Osho speaks to us of unconditional love, and the only kind of love I've known in my life is conditional love, how will I even be able to participate in that experience or know the vastness and beauty of unconditional love? Or if I've never truly known gratitude and I hear of a master who speaks of gratitude, how can I even know what it is? So language is a very inadequate means of trying to connect with the vastness, the richness, the abundance, and the flowing nature of the universe. The multidimensionality of experiences like love, compassion, and gratitude can never be done justice to with the power of language. But masters like Osho will always use language because, as he says, they try to give you the method by which you can access that experience. So for example, Osho gives us many methods to remove the clogs arteries. You know, our arteries get clogged and we lose our capacity to experience beautiful love. So he tells us of unsobbed tears in our lives, of falling in love with ourselves, of having compassion for ourselves, of accepting and celebrating who we are just the way we are, in the hope that some of these road signs along the highway of life will take you to the citadel of love. So the masters like Osho will give us road signs so that at least we know that we are going along in the same direction. But that is all they can do for us. The reality is that life is a journey with no destination. And we have to be on the highway of life, moving in that direction, moving towards love, moving towards compassion, and all those beautiful states. But our language is so limited. Now, you see somebody loving us very deeply, we may even question their motives if we have never known or tasted that kind of love. Now, Osho insists to drop the mind that thinks in prose and revive another kind of mind that thinks in poetry. So, you know, all of us are amateur poets, amateur musicians, amateur dancers. Osho would remind us, revive those parts of the mind that have almost fallen into disuse, into desuetude, and instead, you know, try to drop the mind that is logical, analytical, and all of that. Let songs be the way of life, declares Osho. Head is anti-mystery. It is trying to demystify existence. But if we move from intellect to intuition, love will begin to grow. And he says, in the soil of the scientific mind, there is some poison that does not allow the seed of religion to grow. It kills it. What is that poison, he asks? And he says, science believes in demystifying existence. And I would say, in the soil of the analytical, logical mind, there is also a poison that kills love. And it is important for us to be able to redefine. And I'm not saying it's inherent in the nature of the science itself, because as you know, many great scientists like Einstein actually become poets and romanticists by the time they die. They actually use the vehicle of science to discover and become awakened to the vastness and the mystery of the universe, to know that the more that they know, the more they don't know, and to start celebrating life's infinite mystery rather than to live complacently in a false sense of security. So what are the two wings of mysticism? The two wings of mysticism, Osho says, is science, which will search for the outer mystery, and mysticism, which will search for the inner mystery. So think about it. There's an inner mystery and an outer mystery. Perhaps if we practice science with the right attitude, not to rob nature of its mystery, but science as a spiritual quest, to be able to appreciate the vastness of the mystery rather than to analyze and just logically figure it out, so to speak. If we embrace the mystery of the universe in the spirit of discovery, the outer mystery of the universe, and celebrate it, mysticism then can enable us to celebrate the inner mystery of the universe. So in that synthesis, says Osho, is a new heaven and a new revolution in which all our present dissonances will dissipate, when science and religion can come together. Because when those polarities are synthesized, he says, it's a domino effect. There are many other things that we have originally related to as polarization that will also come together. Then all of a sudden, man and woman can come together. East and West can come together. Poetry and prose can come together. Love and logic can come together, says Osho, when the two wings of mysticism come together. But too often, because of the dominance of disciplines like economics and engineering, we are always thinking in terms of purpose, whereas the mystic thinks in terms of this Eastern concept of Leela, that the world is a play, and the world is just play. It's a play and just play. So if we say life is play, then we are celebrating life as a purposeless play. It is a sheer celebration, a ceremony of delight, of happiness, of ecstasy, of dance and of song. Then life does not have a purpose. Osho reminds us that things that have a purpose are objects. Like a hammer has a purpose, a screwdriver has a purpose. Anything that has a purpose is less than life. Love has no purpose. A bird singing in the garden has no purpose other than it's overflowing with its sense of delight. And therefore, we have become so attuned to the extrinsic dimensions of life. Almost anything we do, we wonder what is the purpose of it. And this utilitarian consciousness means that it has taken away the poetry of life. Look at someone like Terry Martin, who will be in the outdoors in the wilderness, photographing birds and scenery. He will lose himself just collecting shells on a beach and marveling at their beauty. Ask him, what is the purpose? He has no answer, because that part of him that is a mystic is able to see that real beauty in life can only be experienced, a sense of enchantment can only be experienced when the whole idea of purpose is transcended. Purpose is for mechanical things. Purpose is about utility. But folks, we are here in an era where we even approach relationships in terms of a purpose. I cannot tell you how many people will abandon a beautiful relationship because they have a criterion that this is the purpose that this relationship is supposed to serve. Now, if you're crass, your purpose may be material objectives or something. But if you're spiritually sophisticated, you can even succumb to ideas of spiritual purpose, which are even more of a cancer than just the material purpose. At least the material purpose can be satisfied. You get a big Mercedes Benz and you'll be happy. But the spiritual purpose will know no end to the greed. I want nirvana. I want emancipation. I want moksha. This is the purpose. If this marriage is not taking me closer to nirvana or moksha, I have to leave this beautiful relationship because I am in search of this higher purpose. And in this pursuit of a higher purpose, we will throw people under the bus because we will forget the beauty of the real human being struggling through life, who has brought to us the generous gift of their love. And when people love us, in whatever way they love us, perhaps in a codependent way, perhaps in a blind way, perhaps in a mistaken way. In whatever way they love us, let us open our hearts and feel gratitude for the love that they have brought, however immature and foolish it might be, because perhaps when we embrace their offering with gratitude, they will be transformed, that even their immature love will develop to a higher level of fruition and will become a more mature love. It is the way in which Buddha accepted the last meal that he had, a soup made out of mushrooms. He knew they were poisonous mushrooms, but they were being offered with such love, he decided he was going to accept the poisonous mushrooms as an offering because it was being offered out of love. Now, and that is amazing. What a lesson to leave behind for the love of love, even in terms of Buddha's life. And so we often set up purposes and our hearts close. And I want us to start approaching relationships intrinsically, not as extrinsically. A relationship doesn't have to contribute to a purpose. The beauty of two people coming together, loving each other, the beauty of then transcending the relationship itself. Because to be a loving presence, you don't even need a person. You don't need an object. You can actually use or journey on the wings of a relationship to then flap your wings and then fly away to become a loving presence without leaving any trace, like the bird, the flight of the bird on the wing, which flies away without a trace. So I want to bring us back to this idea that existence is a sheer joy and exuberance is ceremony, like children jumping and enjoying himself, says Osho. If a child is jumping and enjoying himself and you stop him and say, what is the purpose of your play? He'll say, what? And that's exactly how Osho would love us to be, to dance with existence, to dance with each other, to graciously accept whatever way in which people love us. And even when they unlove us, to be grateful for the ways in which they have loved us. And even when they unlove us, to be grateful for the fact that their love was with us for the time that it was. And on that note of gratitude, folks, I bring this talk to an end. I will be turning off the recording at this point. And for those of you who've been with us in previous sessions, you're aware that there is a presentation, and then we turn off the recording and we have a few minutes of interactive discussion where I encourage people to turn their cameras on unless they're seriously constrained, because to have your cameras on, we can participate in a little bit of a satsang, being with the truth of our own lives, of our own experiences. And then we end the seminar right around 3 for about 20 minutes of exchange. So you can leave at any point. There is no compulsion to stay. But if you choose to stay, it'll be lovely to hear your take on living life as a mystery. Perhaps share your experiences of when in your life have you tasted mystery, the fragrance of mystery. Okay, on that note, I wish you all very good luck. And I remind our listeners and our viewers that we will be back on the air 2 weeks from now with a new topic. Alternate Sundays is when we have the Sunday webinars. And finally, I did publish a column in the cleveland.com that I attached to the announcement with this seminar. It was called The Magic Pill of Unconditional Love. That was the secret pill of I forget what exactly the title is, but it's about, the secret pill of unconditional loving. And it was in the cleveland.com. So if you type in Param, love, cleveland.com, you will be able to read it. It's a 3-minute read. I would encourage you to read it because it's an excellent accompaniment to today's session. Thank you so much, and may love shower upon you abundantly. Thank you.